and then the descent where it's sand through the fingers, and then the without? Or are you ever really without fame? Can you ever not be famous again?
They told her the price of survival in Hollywood wasn't talent, discipline, or reinvention. It was surgery. After 7 seasons of laughter with America as Mallory Keaton on Family Ties, Justine Bateman walked into a new kind of casting call: consultation rooms, fluorescent lights, and a quiet ultimatum. If she wanted to keep working, they said, she needed to fix her face. 3 surgeons, multiple proposals, one decision that split her life in 2. This is not a scandal story about substances or a starlet's meltdown. It's the colder truth of an industry that packages youth, sells it back to us as destiny, and discards the women who outgrow the box. Justine said no. She turned away from the conveyor belt, away from the safer roles, the easy applause, the velvet prison of being forever Mallory. In the silence that followed, headlines called her aged. Agents called less. But the person who emerged off-camera was not an echo of a sitcom. She learned to direct. She went back to school. She wrote about fame hijacking reality and about the shame industry that mistakes a woman's face for her worth. Tonight, we're reopening a file Hollywood would prefer to keep closed, the one where a teen idol rejects the knife and chooses authorship instead, where the fall from prime time becomes an ascent into a more dangerous freedom, where a woman refuses to stay beautiful in the way the machine demands and becomes unforgettable on her own terms. Justine Tanya Bateman was born on February 19, 1966, in Rye, New York, into a household where performance wasn't a dream but a daily ritual. Her father, Kent Bateman, was not only an acting coach but a theatrical manager. He filled the Bateman living room with actors rehearsing lines, with scripts piled high on coffee tables, with endless conversations about the mechanics of show business. Her mother, Victoria, had once been a flight attendant for Pan Am. Born in Malta and raised in England, she brought a distinctly European air into their home, a mix of discipline and cosmopolitan charm. Together, they created an environment where show business was less of an aspiration and more of a birthright. From the earliest years, Justine's life was shaped by this environment. At only 2 years old, she was already overhearing actors practicing monologues in her living room. By the time she could read, she was reciting lines, mimicking cadences, watching auditions happen not in theaters but in her own house. For her, childhood was not cartoons and playgrounds, but scripts, performances, and whispered critiques about who might make it and who might not. 4 years later came Jason, her younger brother, destined for his own fame. Hollywood would later call them a rare sibling phenomenon, 2 children raised under the same roof, both carrying the same restless spark. Yet in those early years, what bound them was not glamour, but pressure. Kent was no passive parent. He kept meticulous records of their appearances, their vocal inflections, even their posture. He timed their mock auditions, comparing the two, rating their confidence as if they were already clients in his portfolio. Childhood wasn't measured in birthdays or summer vacations. It was measured in practice hours, auditions, and critiques. The Batemans moved often, chasing opportunity. Salt Lake City, various towns in California. By the time Justine turned 12, she had attended 5 different elementary schools in 3 states. Each move forced her to adapt quickly, to become a chameleon in order to survive socially. She learned to read people, to switch her personality on cue, to charm when necessary. Outwardly, she became adaptable, a quick study of human behavior. Inwardly, she carried the loneliness of never belonging anywhere long enough to call it home. That survival mechanism would later morph into perfectionism, a desperate need to control her own narrative in a world that constantly sought to define her. Even school was no refuge. While other children of actors were privately tutored, her parents insisted she attend public school to stay grounded. Instead, it isolated her. Teachers treated her differently. Peers mocked her as Hollywood Justine, and she missed birthday parties and sleepovers because parents didn't want their children too close to show business. At an age when most kids were learning to fit in, Justine was learning to endure ridicule while wearing a mask of calm. By the time she reached adolescence, the stage was already set. Justine Bateman wasn't just another teenager in the San Fernando Valley. She was a product of relentless grooming, a child raised in the glare of an industry before she had even stepped on stage. The girl who would one day make millions laugh on Family Ties was, behind closed doors, already carrying the invisible scars of a life scripted by others. By the time Justine Bateman was 13, the family had finally settled in Los Angeles, in the San Fernando Valley, a deliberate choice. Kent Bateman knew both of his children were reaching the perfect age for television castings, and he wanted them close to the epicenter of auditions. Within 6 months, Justine and Jason had signed with the same agency, marketed as a sibling package deal. It was a clever strategy. Casting directors were intrigued by the rarity of two talented kids from the same family, and it often got them into rooms that might otherwise have remained closed. For Justine, those rooms quickly became a way of life. In just her first 18 months in Los Angeles, she attended more than 150 auditions. Her father tracked each one in meticulous detail: who the casting director was, what was said afterward, what she needed to improve, and who her competition had been. Their Woodland Hills home became less of a sanctuary and more of a training ground. Kent ran acting workshops in the living room, and Justine was expected to attend whether she had a role lined up or not. Acting was not optional. It was the air she breathed. At 15, she booked her first professional job, a small commercial. It may have been fleeting, but it was proof that she could break through. Yet even this small victory came with enormous pressure. California labor laws required child actors to maintain strong grades or lose work permits. So Justine's life became a treadmill, filming by day, rushing back to class, studying late into the night. While her classmates worried about prom and football games, Justine juggled scripts and schoolwork, already living in two incompatible worlds. Her peers noticed her talent. Teachers admired her stage presence, and drama class revealed a natural ease in front of an audience. But socially, she remained on the fringes. She missed parties, weekends, and casual teenage rituals because she was always preparing for the next audition. At 15, she was already making choices that most people don't face until adulthood, sacrificing youth for the promise of a career. Between 1980 and 1981, the grind grew sharper. She faced rejection after rejection, often for arbitrary reasons: too tall, wrong hair color, not the type we want. Each rejection stung not just for her, but for the family's finances. Every lost role meant less income, another mark in Kent's ledger. Yet every no hardened her, teaching her that survival in Hollywood was less about fairness and more about endurance. In 1981, she landed a small guest role on Little House on the Prairie, the very series where her younger brother Jason was already making a mark. Watching him succeed while she scraped for scraps fueled both pride and pressure. She studied the veteran actors on set, soaking in lessons about timing, professionalism, and the subtlety of performance. Then, in 1982, at just 16 years old, she got the call that would change everything. NBC wanted her for Family Ties. The role was Mallory Keaton, the teenage daughter of an Ohio family navigating the culture clash between liberal parents and their conservative, ambitious son, Alex. What Justine didn't know was that this role, her big break, would also become her gilded cage. When Family Ties premiered in 1982, NBC had modest expectations. It was a family sitcom in an era already saturated with them. But within 2 seasons, it transformed into a cultural juggernaut, pulling in more than 20 million viewers each week and climbing into the top 5 most-watched shows in America. At the heart of this surge were 2 things: Michael J. Fox's breakout as Alex P. Keaton and the undeniable charm of Justine Bateman as Mallory. Mallory was meant to be smart, even scholarly. Early scripts wrote her that way. But during test runs, audiences laughed harder when Justine leaned into a certain lightheartedness, a naive delivery that played against her sharp intelligence in real life. Executives noticed. Writers rewrote. Soon, Mallory evolved into the quintessential dumb blonde archetype, obsessed with shopping, boyfriends, and frivolity. It was an image that stuck. America loved it, and ratings proved it. But for Justine, it meant years of playing a version of herself that was alien to who she really was. Still, the fame was instantaneous. Teen magazines plastered her on covers, dubbing her one of the decade's most desirable young stars. Paparazzi trailed her every move. Mallory Keaton wasn't just a TV character. She became a cultural shorthand, a face of the 1980s. With each episode, Justine earned $10,000, a staggering sum for a teenager. And across 7 seasons, she filmed 176 episodes. Her chemistry with Michael J. Fox was electric, his ambitious Alex sparring with her fashion-obsessed Mallory. And together, they pulled millions of households into NBC's orbit every Thursday night. Awards followed quickly. In 1983, she won the Young Artist Award for Best Young Actress in a Comedy Series. And by 1986 and 1987, she was nominated for 2 Primetime Emmys. But while the trophies glittered, they couldn't hide the frustrations behind the curtain. What began as a show about the entire Keaton family slowly morphed into The Alex P. Keaton Show. Writers leaned on Michael J. Fox's meteoric rise, sidelining other characters, including Mallory. Meredith Baxter, who played the mother, felt her role shrinking too. For Justine, it was like watching the walls close in. The same recycled jokes, the same shallow storylines. While Alex chased Wall Street dreams, Mallory shopped for shoes. Yet Justine didn't sit idle. In 1986, at only 20 years old, she directed an episode of Family Ties, a rare accomplishment for a young woman in Hollywood. That single credit hinted at what she might become: a filmmaker, not just a sitcom star. More than 30 million viewers watched her directorial debut. Still, her creative ambitions clashed with the industry's narrow view of her. She longed for more emotional depth, more complex roles, but Hollywood only saw the ditzy girl next door. Behind the laughter and lights, a darker battle raged. From the age of 16, Justine struggled with eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, and cycles of binge eating. Between takes, she sometimes ran off set to purge, then returned to perform with a smile. Tabloids obsessed over her weight, scrutinizing her body in glossy spreads. The pressure to remain thin, young, and perfect gnawed at her, even as millions envied her. She later admitted her body image was shattered, that she spent those years dizzy, malnourished, yet expected to sparkle as America's sweetheart. Still, she made deliberate choices. Despite offers for multi-million-dollar film deals, she stayed loyal to Family Ties. She even took part in educational videos for teens, hoping to use her platform for something meaningful. She proved her dramatic chops on St. Elsewhere, even sharing a guest role with Jason. But those efforts were overshadowed by Mallory's shadow. To the world, she was still the silly sister, no matter how much range she showed. By 1987, she faced a cruel paradox. She was beloved by fans, but dismissed by critics who deemed sitcom acting easy. When she lost an Emmy to Estelle Getty of The Golden Girls, many felt she deserved it, but Hollywood rarely crowned young women in comedy with serious recognition. Worse, when Justine tried to enroll in college, Paramount stopped her. "You're under contract," they said. Mallory Keaton was allowed to grow up on screen, attending fictional college classes, while Justine Bateman, the real young woman, was barred from doing the same. She called it devastating.
Then came 1989. The Family Ties finale aired with over 36 million viewers, making it one of the most watched series endings in television history. It should have been a triumphant send-off, and on screen it was. Justine gave a heartfelt farewell as Mallory, cementing her place in sitcom legend. But off-screen, the celebration soured. The very next day, Justine was unemployed. Every casting director who saw her resume saw one thing: Mallory Keaton. For 7 years, she had been America's daughter. Now she was trapped by that very image. She had been typecast so perfectly that Hollywood couldn't imagine her as anything else. While Michael J. Fox catapulted into movie stardom with Back to the Future, Justine faced closed doors and dismissive glances. The golden years of her career had come with a price tag, a gilded cage from which escape would prove nearly impossible.
The very role that made Justine Bateman a household name would also become her curse. For 7 years, Mallory Keaton had been her alter ego, loved, laughed at, mimicked. But when Family Ties ended in 1989, Justine discovered the truth about Hollywood's devotion. It was shallow, conditional, and brutally short-lived. Casting directors couldn't see beyond Mallory. They told her she was too ingrained in that image, that audiences would never believe her as anyone else. It didn't matter that she had range, intelligence, and ambition. She was locked in a stereotype. The rejection cut deep. She had grown up in a system where every no felt like failure, every closed door like a personal flaw. Only now, the no wasn't about being too tall or too inexperienced, it was about being Mallory Keaton. The irony was cruel. The better she had been at her job, the harder it became to get another one. To make matters worse, Justine's private battles bled into her professional life. Since her teens, she had struggled with eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, cycles of self-punishment hidden beneath flawless sitcom delivery. Between scenes, she sometimes ran to the bathroom to purge, then returned with a smile, camera ready. Tabloids speculated endlessly about her weight, her looks, her decline. Hollywood devoured her body as part of the product it had sold, and now that product was deemed insufficient. She tried to reinvent herself. In 1990, she starred in The Fatal Image, a thriller filmed in Paris, hoping to shed Mallory's skin with something darker, more complex. Critics weren't convinced. Mallory Keaton with a French twist, some said. Later came Deadbolt in 1992, where she played a medical student trapped by a manipulative roommate. The role eerily mirrored her own life. Fame had become her dangerous roommate, locking her inside expectations she couldn't escape. Then came the most sinister blow. In the mid-1990s, her agent sat her down with an ultimatum. If she wanted to keep working, she would need plastic surgery. They weren't asking her to hone her craft, to audition harder, to reinvent her brand. They were telling her to carve up her face. Hollywood's obsession with youth had come knocking, and Justine, still in her 20s, was told she already looked old. When she Googled herself, the top suggestion was, "Justine Bateman looks old." It stung like acid. She even went so far as to meet with 3 different surgeons in Beverly Hills. The conversations were clinical, the pressure immense. Nip the eyelids, lift the face, erase the years. She considered it. But deep down, something in her revolted. She knew that once she surrendered to the scalpel, she would be erasing more than wrinkles. She would be erasing her authority, her authenticity, her very self. So she walked away. It wasn't a glamorous act of rebellion. It was quiet, lonely, terrifying. And it had consequences. Acting offers dried up. Roles that could have reignited her career went to younger, surgically altered faces. Hollywood has always been quick to discard women once they're no longer ingenues. For Justine, the exile began early. The contrast with her brother made the pain sharper. While she struggled in silence, Jason found a second wind in Arrested Development. He was praised, showered with awards, embraced by the industry. Justine, meanwhile, was sidelined, her phone silent. To the outside world, she was fading. To her, it felt like suffocation. But the darkness wasn't only professional. Personally, she spiraled into postpartum depression after the birth of her second child in 2004. For 8 months, she barely recognized herself, 40 pounds heavier, unable to sleep, panic attacks chaining her to her home. The world moved on without her. Hollywood certainly did. The girl once photographed on every teen magazine cover was now a ghost in her own life. The industry's cruelty reached a peak in the 2000s gossip culture. Every candid photo was dissected. What happened to Justine Bateman became a recurring headline. The narrative was simple. She had gotten older. And in Hollywood, that was unforgivable. The same machine that had cheered her at 16 now mocked her at 40. But Justine's refusal to conform was, in its own way, a revolution. She didn't cut her face to stay relevant. She didn't chase sitcom roles that mocked her intelligence. Instead, she began to write. First scripts, then essays, then books. She reframed her scars as strength, her aging face as defiance. Later, in her 2021 book, Face, 1 Square Foot of Skin, she would articulate it bluntly. If I changed my face, I would lose my authority. The dark side of Justine Bateman's story isn't scandal or drugs or crime. It's the quieter, more insidious violence of an industry that tells women they are disposable once they no longer resemble teenagers. It's the humiliation of being told to erase your humanity to stay employable. And it's the quiet bravery of saying no, even when the price is exile.
By the late 1990s, Justine Bateman's star had dimmed. The girl who once drew 30 million viewers a week on Family Ties now found herself auditioning for pilots that never made it past the first table read. Projects slipped away one after another. Casting directors, unable or unwilling to look past Mallory Keaton, dismissed her before she even spoke. Hollywood had cheered her youth, then discarded her maturity. In 1996, she joined the NBC sitcom Men Behaving Badly as Sarah, the steady girlfriend of one of the leads. The pilot pulled nearly 15 million viewers. For a moment, it felt like the beginning of a second act. But behind the scenes, the show was chaos. Fights over money, clashing egos, creative rifts. By the end of the first season, Justine walked away. The series barely limped through a second season before being canceled. What had seemed like a lifeline dissolved into another closed door. Then came the ultimatum from her agents: change your face or lose your future. In a town where youth is currency, Hollywood deemed her spent before she had even reached 30. She had met with surgeons, weighed the knife against her career, and chosen to keep her face intact. It was the braver decision, but also the costlier one. Work offers evaporated almost overnight. To the industry, Justine Bateman had become an artifact of the past. As the new millennium dawned, her absence from screens was conspicuous. While contemporaries chased movie careers or reinvented themselves, Justine slipped further into the margins. She poured her Family Ties earnings into directing, self-funding short films that few outside the festival circuit would ever see. She was no longer playing Hollywood's game, but the price of independence was obscurity. Her personal life mirrored the turbulence of her professional one. After marrying real estate executive Mark Fluent in 2001, she gave birth to her first child, Duke, in 2002. For the first time since 1982, she stepped away completely, refusing multi-million-dollar offers in favor of raising her son outside the glare of the spotlight. Hollywood, already unforgiving, did not wait for her return. In 2004, the birth of her daughter, Giannetta, plunged her into darkness. Postpartum depression left her nearly unrecognizable to herself. She gained weight, battled insomnia, endured panic attacks so severe she could barely leave her home. Meanwhile, her brother, Jason Bateman, once overshadowed by her sitcom fame, experienced a career renaissance with Arrested Development. He graced red carpets, collected awards, re-established himself as a leading man. Justine watched from the sidelines, locked in silence. The contrast was excruciating, a reminder that Hollywood had not only forgotten her, but celebrated her sibling in her absence. The tabloids were merciless. Paparazzi caught unflattering photos, attaching captions like, "What happened to Justine Bateman?" Online searches paired her name with the word old. For a woman who had once defined teen glamour, it was a public shaming, a digital pillory. Hollywood had always been brutal, but now the cruelty was personal. The tragedy of Justine Bateman wasn't a spectacular scandal or a dramatic implosion. It was quieter, colder, being erased by an industry she had given everything to. For decades, she had been America's Mallory Keaton. Now she was a cautionary tale, proof of what happens when a woman refuses to mutilate herself to stay employable in Hollywood. And yet, within this fall lay the seeds of a radical reinvention.
For most of Hollywood, Justine Bateman's story should have ended in the margins. A fallen teen idol who refused to adapt to the rules of survival. But instead, she rewrote her own ending. In 2012, at the age of 46, she walked into a classroom at UCLA and began studying computer science and digital media. Surrounded by teenagers half her age, she confronted the very barrier the studios had once erected when they forbade her from going to college. What she couldn't do at 19, she claimed at 50. 4 years later, she graduated, holding a degree that silenced critics who had once dismissed her as nothing more than Mallory Keaton. Parallel to her academic reinvention, Justine found a second voice behind the camera. She directed short films like 5 Minutes and Push, both acclaimed on the festival circuit. In 2021, her feature debut, Violet, starring Olivia Munn and Justin Theroux, premiered at SXW. It was not a glossy studio project, but an unflinching meditation on fear, anxiety, and the destructive voice inside one's head, a reflection of her own battles with Hollywood's judgment. Her writing pushed even further. In Fame, The Hijacking of Reality, 2018, she dissected the psychological wounds left by celebrity culture. In Face, 1 Square Foot of Skin, 2021, she took direct aim at the obsession with youth and beauty, declaring unapologetically that she would never alter her face to appease the industry. "Every wrinkle is a story," she said. That refusal transformed her into a cultural symbol of authenticity in an era of filters and fillers. Most recently, she has turned her focus toward technology, founding Credo 23, a collective opposing AI's encroachment in filmmaking. On picket lines during the Hollywood strikes, she warned that synthetic actors and machine-written scripts threatened not just artists, but the very soul of storytelling. At 59, Justine Bateman no longer belongs to Hollywood's past. She belongs to its conscience. Her legacy is not the laughter of Mallory Keaton, but the courage of a woman who refused to be erased by surgery, by industry, or by time itself.
Hollywood once told Justine Bateman she was finished, that her face had aged, her time had passed, her worth was gone. But instead of surrendering, she turned that rejection into a rebellion. She became a filmmaker, a writer, an activist, and a living reminder that truth and creativity cannot be manufactured by scalpels or machines. And now, the question is no longer about her career. It's about us. What kind of Hollywood do we want to believe in? One that erases its artists the moment they age? Or one that values the stories etched into every wrinkle, every scar, every line of a lived life? Let me know in the comments. Do you think Justine Bateman's stand against Hollywood's obsession with youth and AI is the future we need? And don't forget, subscribe to Beyond the Red Carpet for more Untold Hollywood Files.